Bonjour et bienvenue à un autre épisode de Minut Michif. Moi, c'est Barney Morin, and today as a guest, we have Chantal Fiola. She is an associate professor at the University of Winnipeg. She's also the Distinguished Indigenous Scholars Chair at the University of Winnipeg, and she's also an author, and she's been delving into Métis spirituality. Thank you very much for joining us, Chantal.
Very much.
So Métis spirituality, there's a lot of people who are slowly connecting back to it. Where did your journey start with this?
So, like a lot of Red River Métis people, I was actually raised Catholic, very heavily involved in the church, but I ended up walking away as a young person, a young teenager. I didn't really feel like I was being supported as a Michif person, as a female person, and also as a queer person. So it was actually through higher education, when I went away to grad school, where I had my first Michif professor, and she made use of smudge and sharing circles and taught us a lot about colonization and decolonization in the classroom. And then after that, when I did a PhD in Indigenous Studies at Trent University, I met Mideowan elders. So for folks who might not be aware, the Mideowan is basically an ancestral spiritual way of life practiced among the Anishinaabe, but also other Indigenous nations, including the Michif Nation, as I would later learn through my studies. And some of those folks kind of took me under their wing and started bringing me to ceremonies, and I was able to reconnect in that way.
Yeah, because there's been some disconnect from Métis people and spirituality that most people kind of associate to First Nations.
Absolutely. It's not by accident that we have those harmful stereotypes today that all Métis people are Catholic, Métis people don't participate in ceremonies, ceremonies are only a First Nations thing. All of those statements are much more complex in reality, but some of the reasons why those stereotypes exist and persist is because of things like the day schools and residential schools or the child welfare system. Canada actually made Indigenous ceremonies illegal for nearly 100 years.
Yeah.
And also, I like to mention that, the churches and the governments played a role in kind of separating Métis and First Nations people. So while, yes, of course, we are distinct Indigenous nations, we're also relatives. But we've been encouraged to forget that and to become like wholly distinct, even for legal purposes. So those are just some of the reasons why so many Métis have become disconnected. But thankfully, more and more of us are finding our way back today.
Yeah, so let's say there's someone who's watching right now who's a young Métis or any kind of Métis who maybe didn't grow up with this spirituality and maybe want to start connecting with it. Like how would you introduce them and prepare them to start learning this way of life?
So there's a couple different things folks can do. Like, first of all, folks can read my books because I've talked with lots of Métis people. I've read all about, like, Gabriel Dumont, for example, was very heavily involved with ceremonies. Like,
I didn't know that.
And most Métis people don't know that. And he's like one of the most famous Métis ever. So he was a pipe carrier. He was a sweat lodge carrier. He participated in sun dances. He was a shkabe or a helper to his father-in-law. But anyways, so for people that are looking to connect today, educate yourself, first of all. Try to unlearn some of the unhelpful colonial messaging and the stereotypes that we talked about. But also, talk to the old ones in your family. There are some Métis people that maintained these ways or knowledge of these ways and their family's connection this whole time.
Right.
But because of the disconnection that I mentioned, it's probably more common to have a history of disconnection among the Métis. So don't be disappointed if the old people in your family don't have this knowledge. There are other ways for you to reconnect and essentially find community. So if you have friends that go to ceremonies, ask if you could tag along. Right. They'll also help you to learn protocol. There's protocol around going to ceremonies. They can help with that. I also encourage people to don't pass up opportunities to learn teachings or work with medicines.
Which we have right now.
Yeah,
we can do that right now.
Yes.
Because I grew up a Catholic, so I don't see wine or a little piece of bread here. So tell me about what we have here. And I know some of it, but for some people, this could be a good, I think, introduction to some of the medicines.
Yeah. So I've accepted tobacco here, which we are taught is one of our first medicines. So we're taught that medicines are alive, they're animate, they have spirit, and so we can develop a relationship with them. So we introduce ourselves to the medicine. You can do that in your mind or out loud. If you're working with tobacco, tobacco helps our prayers reach Creator or ancestors or what have you. So try to be very explicit and specific with your request, and then you can make your offering and leave your tobacco in a clean place, like at the base of a tree. And so if you're looking for teachers or where to go to ceremonies, like having faith, your prayers will be answered.
Right. I mean, just for people, break the fourth wall for a second. So I gave Chantal tobacco to ask for her teachings in these ceremonies because I don't know how to teach this, but Chantal does. So I offered that to her with specific intentions of this, and she accepted it, and then now we can go with the teachings, right? So that's a bit of some of the backstory. If you're looking for teachings, having a tobacco bundle to give to someone is a super good way to start those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So different medicines have different purposes. I talked a little bit about tobacco. We have a little bit of sage here in our abalone shell. So sage is really helpful as like a cleansing medicine. So if you had a nightmare, you can cleanse yourself. If you got a big meeting or you're about to do some collaborative work, the people in the room can smudge together and like become of one mind. It's also useful for cleansing your environment. So you could waft the smoke around the room as well. So just like the medicines have spirit and are animate, same with fire, right? So we're encouraged to introduce ourselves to the fire, to the medicines. Like I said, you could do it in your mind, you could do it out loud.
So like you literally introduce yourself.
I literally introduce myself, yeah. And then you don't need a feather, but they're beautiful and wonderful just to encourage the smoke to really get going. And so it's the smoke itself that washes us. So you can wash your hands so that you do good work. Okay. You can wash your mind, clear your mind, make room for good thoughts. Same with your vision, your hearing, so that you speak good words, your heart, so that you can do things in a good way. You can wash it down. You could even put it under your feet to walk in a good way.
Okay. I can. So, clear my mind. What I hear, what I see, what I say, what I feel. And we'll be walking during festival, so let's walk in a good way for that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty safe way for people to start, and you know there's a few protocols, but it's sort of a good place for people to start their spiritual journey.
Yeah. Yep. So like on the note of protocols, like different places or communities might have different protocols. Mm-hmm. So if a community does it different than the way that you've been taught, it doesn't mean that one is wrong. We're taught to like respect each other's ways, and like especially if you're ever a guest on somebody's territory or in their home, you can kind of defer to the way that they do it, but you don't have to change the way you do it in your own home. Gotcha. Sort of thing. It's just basically about respect. And so like the point of this is to encourage those relationships with the medicines, with the fire, and the tobacco, and trying to live a good life, trying to be a good human. So
that's another really good way. If you guys are looking to start, Chantal has done a lot of the work for us of searching for Métis spirituality. So you can see her 2 books, Rekindling the Sacred Fire and Returning to Ceremony. Merci beaucoup, Chantal. Thanks for taking a little minute with us.
Merci.